This is video 5.7, focusing on bringing community into discipleship and making a plan. Whatever discipleship strategy you create throughout this course and your ministry lifetime, I hope that including some other person in some way in your discipling relationship is a part of it. If you remember back to Module 1, that discipleship line that represents the three relationships between Jesus and you and the other person, you'll notice that as you look at that picture, there's someone missing. There's not an outside person in there, right? But if you zoom out to your relationship web, made up of all those different discipling relationships, that's where you see the value in bringing in others. Having a step in which you intentionally think about who to share a discipleship relationship with and how to invite them into it will help you create a discipling culture that does a couple of things for you. It relieves you of carrying too much burden and responsibility, and it also sets up a support system that better supports the other person's faith journey and models to them how they can then contribute to discipleship. Remember earlier, Jared talked about how this spreading out of the discipleship support to a communal web rather than a top-down approach helps also naturally guard you from burnout and from developing narcissistic leadership qualities. It also protects the other person from your failures. If you've been a part of church long enough, I'm sure that you have seen this. A leader in the church has had sometimes decades worth of discipling relationships. But then that leader has some kind of serious moral failure maybe. And what happens to all those people that they discipled? I personally witnessed the same story actually played out in multiple circumstances with a couple of youth ministers of some of the churches in the area I grew up in. The story went like this. The youth minister was the faith example and discipler to many of my friends whom I came to faith with. But in later years, he ended up having an affair that shook his own faith. And when my friends saw the person who brought them to faith lose his faith, then the downward spiral of questions began. And he ends up leaving a trail of spiritual destruction behind him. We still witness this on a regular basis when we run into people who were a part of Mars Hill here in Seattle. Inviting someone else into your discipling relationship contributes in so many positive ways. You need to have it be a part of your discipleship strategy. So, what does it look like to invite someone else in? There are many ways to do this, and you want to just base it upon what you need or what the person you're discipling needs. Here's a few examples. The first is for circumstances that you're maybe a little unsure of what to do, you're wanting some feedback or direction, and in these cases you'll want to turn to some of your mentors whom you trust. Share the situation with them, let them know what you're thinking as far as how you're processing or your thoughts on maybe the next steps, and then ask for any feedback or guidance. I'd encourage you to process things with a mentor for your first few discipling relationships as you're initially building the skills and confidence. Another way to invite someone in is by thinking of them as a resource. If your friend is asking questions about a specific topic, think of who you know who has knowledge in that field. Don't rely on yourself to know everything because you don't know everything, just letting you know. Jared shared with you in Module 2 about how he's found it useful in his discipling strategy often to go through a book or some kind of resource together with someone else that kind of addresses some of the questions that they are asking. We recently had a friend who had some questions based on the spiritual world and how that relates to the physical world. And Jared talked with one of his other friends who he knew had read a lot about this, and this other friend recommended a book, said this is the best thing for you right now. So Jared was able to get the book and started reading through it with our other friend. Another example is with a church nearby that we've begun to notice some manipulative tendencies, and I knew I was going to be connecting with a friend from that church, so I asked another friend who's a counselor, what are the kinds of questions you would ask someone who's in a manipulative relationship? And that friend was able to help me, give me some guidance for my conversation that was going to be happening soon. A third way to invite someone else into the discipling relationship is actually connecting people together in some way. Sometimes the next step someone needs in their faith journey is maybe having a deeper connection with someone else in the church other than you. Or maybe you think of someone who has a shared interest or a shared experience that you think would be helpful for those two people to connect. We joke that a lot of our role as ministers is to set people up on play dates, like we set our kids up on play dates. We invite several people over to our home on a regular basis to give them the opportunity to connect with one another. And it's really funny because Jared's such a people person that when our connecting people actually works and we realize later that they've connected and maybe gone on a hike or something together, Jared has serious FOMO that he was not invited. So the plan works, but Jared still struggles with it. So those are 3 examples of what sharing the discipling relationship with community can look like. It could be connecting with a mentor for guidance or feedback, going to someone for the resources they can provide, or inviting someone else into relationship. And this step of sharing with community plays a significant role in developing your discipleship plan with the person, whether it's getting direction or feedback on what you're thinking for that plan, providing a resource for your plan, or actually helping carry out the plan if you've determined making a connection with someone else as a part of that. There's just a couple things I want to address before we wrap up. First, this is not an abdication of your discipling role. You aren't simply passing someone off to someone else. You're inviting someone else into it in some capacity, whether it's large or small. And second, sharing that discipleship relationship with someone else should not happen at the expense of confidentiality. Remember from Module 2, one of the characteristics of an effective discipler is someone who is trustworthy. People are trusting you with their stories, so confidentiality is vital. And you'll take your lead from them as to the level of confidentiality. You'll notice in the examples I just shared of ways to bring in community, in many of those cases, you can do that without sharing any kind of personal information. If there are circumstances where maybe you're asking someone for a specific resource or needing feedback from a mentor and you think it'll be beneficial to share some information, be sure that you're either A, not using names, or B, and preferably, you get permission. The best and easiest way to uphold confidentiality is to simply ask for permission for whatever it is you have in mind. You may think this will feel weird or that you're actually disrupting that trust by even asking, but that's just not true. The fact that you would even ask someone for their permission to share a specific part of their story for a specific purpose can earn trust in just a minute that it could take sometimes several weeks or months to earn. So as you develop your discipleship strategy, make sure to include sharing in community somehow as a part of either helping develop your specific plan or helping carry out that plan.